Hey everyone, I'm Katie Bertrand and today we're going to do some alterations. So if you are not familiar with my videos here on what I do, I actually own a shop in Louisville, Kentucky called So Cute by Katie, and we do alterations and embroidery and have a full gift shop of all kinds of fun things that we sell to Monogram. But how I got started in my business was doing alterations as a little side business, a little side hustle at home before I actually opened my storefront. And a lot of people that sew do not like to do alterations, but for some reason I absolutely love it. But it's something I learned on my own. There's not a lot of instructions on how to do alterations. So I always just found it kind of like a puzzle, putting a puzzle back together kind of thing. So today I'm going to show you how to do some alterations on taking up the shoulders of a dress. I have a bridesmaid's dress here. This is actually fitting on a junior bridesmaid, so it's really big on her. So we have fitted on her, we put the dress on and we just pull up the shoulders to where it fits and then put a pin right here so to hold the amount that we need to take up, which is what I've done right here. So today I'm just going to show you how you can fix this. So if things are hanging, if it's too long, that kind of thing, you need to pull it up in the shoulders. A lot of times, if dresses or tops don't fit correctly, a lot of it can be taken care of by just pulling the shoulders up. It's just too big, it's hanging, it's not in the right spot. Just makes everything fit better. So the very first thing I'm going to do, so as you can see right here, is I'm going to take a piece of chalk. Now this is Taylor's chalk. I love this kind of chalk because it will come off with an iron, just like steaming it. So I'm going to take my chalk and I'm going to rub it over where the pin is, right there, to create a line, and I'm going to do the same thing on the back. So the ends of it, I can feel the ends of the pin on either side here. So right there, I have just rubbed it over the pin, and then I do it on the back side. And I'm gonna take the pin out. Okay, so now you can see I've got marks from front and back. So that's a good portion. And actually I'm gonna need my little hem gauge, my other favorite tool. Let me grab it. I did not get it before I started. Okay, so if you do any kind of sewing, especially alterations, this is my absolute favorite tool, this little hem gauge, because it's just a little mini ruler. Also, my other favorite tool is your seam ripper and chalk. So I'm just going to measure this also. So this is 3.5, okay, from the 2 marks that I made. So I'm going to have to take that, divide that in half. So to take this apart, you're going to see, we're going to open up the seams on either side. So make sure, and I'm going to put my readers on so I can see well. So you want to take your seam ripper and you see right in there. So I'm going to put the seam ripper right in between the 2 pieces of fabric, and my seam ripper is nice and sharp. Be very careful that you are just breaking the threads in between the fabrics and not ripping a hole in it, especially if you have a brand new seam ripper, because they're super sharp. And sometimes you can get going and then rip your fabric, and that is not good, especially depending on, it may be going back into the seam, it may not make a difference, but if it's not, you don't want to do that. And then I'm just flipping it over on the other side. So the other side has this stitching on top, the understitching. So again, we're slipping it right under those stitches. Just very carefully. You want to just get it started and just very carefully just break a couple threads before you can really get your seam ripper in there. So I broke a couple threads, and then I'm going to just use my fingers, and you can kind of pull it apart. So I want to show you, so I'm pulling this apart a little bit to kind of get it started. So if you see right there, your stitches, that's what I'm using my seam ripper to unstitch. And I'm just kind of running it through there. So you can break some, cut them, and then just, you know, with your hand, just pull the two sides apart, you know, until you can't pull it anymore, and then you'll need to cut more with your seam ripper. You want to open this past the marks that you made, okay? No, I'm not quite there yet on this side. And the thing with alterations, it can be a little challenging because all garments are made or put together differently. I mean, for the most part, the construction should be the same, but sometimes they're just put together. There may be a lot of stitching in some and not as much on others. And I'll be perfectly honest, garments that are like just cheap little fun things, you know, are usually the worst ones to get apart. Okay, so I've now separated this. So I've got the lining separated from the outer part, and I've got it opened. My mark is here, and so I've got it opened about 1 inch past either side. Okay? So sometimes what I like to do is get my pins and put a pin where on the lining side, so I have my chalk mark on the top, and I'm gonna put a pin, I can feel with my finger, just to help me mark the lining because it was closed up in there. I can feel it with my fingers. So I just put 2 pins. That just helps me when I'm sewing the linings back together. And I actually caught the other part, so make sure you don't have the top part stuck in. So it's still separated. So what I will do is I'm going to turn this top part, this is the outer part, and I'm going to come up from the underneath side, and I'm going to put a pin right through my line. This just helps me to see it and to know where those lines are. So I'm coming in from the other side right on my chalk line. Okay, so now I'm going to flip this, and I'm putting right sides together. This is the outer part. And I want to meet, I want my chalk marks to meet, and my pins are right here, so I know where it is. And I'm going to take 1 pin out, and I'm going to pin it together. This is my sewing line. That is where I'm going to sew this. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stitch this together, but I want to make sure that all the seam allowance is undone and it's flat. That, and I'm going to stitch this together. Right on that line, and I'm going to do a little back stitch because you need to hold it. Pull my pin out. I'm going to stitch straight across. I've just stitched that together. Now, because I have so much excess, I'm just going to cut this open. If you don't have a lot of excess, you want to take your seam ripper and open up this seam, which I'm just going to do to show you, but on this particular one, I'm just going to cut it off. So if you don't have a lot, because you want to, just in case you need to make adjustments later, you want to open that up and then press that seam open. So that's just if you have a little bit, you know. For the most part, you're probably going to be taking it up quite a bit, and I'm going to cut this off. Okay, so now, because you still want to leave a decent seam allowance in there. You don't want to cut it so close. And then you press that open. so it's nice and flat. And you're going to do the same thing to this lining piece. So I'm going to turn this and put the lining pieces right sides together, and I'm matching up where these pins are because we're taking this up the same amount as the outer part so that it matches up. Let me get a pin for here. So I pinned that together right where those pins matched. And this folded, you know, where this is, we want to unfold this on both sides and start sewing from the outer part. These threads. So now we have this larger seam allowance. So I have so much, I'm just going to cut it. I don't have to open it, but I'm leaving, you know, let's see, how much am I leaving? About an inch. About an inch. I mean, you want to leave yourself a little bit of a seam allowance just in case you need to, you know, it's too tight for any reason. You may need to open it back up and make any type of adjustments to let it out. Okay, so now I just want to show you this. So we're laying this flat, so it should fit back together. If it's not quite matching up, you can just take it up a little bit more. Okay, so we want to sew this back together. So a lot of times what you need to do, and some dresses do this and some dresses don't, so we're going to check this one out. I'm going to go up through the skirt and see if I can get into the bodice of the dress. So this, let's see, how many linings do we have here? So we've got a sheer piece and 2 linings. Which one did that just work on? Okay, so I'm going to show you what I'm doing here. Get this dress here. So I'm going up into the dress, and I want to see if I can get in between these layers. If I can, that is great. If I cannot, we're going to open it up. So let me see here. A lot of times this has a seam here. A lot of times you'll be able to go straight into the bodice. Let me check this one. Okay, we cannot do that on this dress. So this will be another good example. I'm going to unzip the bodice. Because we want to pull this through and sew it to where we can't see it, what we're going to do now is we're going to open a side seam inside the bodice so that we can pull this through, sew it, and pull it back out, and your stitches, you know, everything will be inside. So you're going to get your seam ripper. You want to leave, you know, at least an inch top or bottom. So don't open it all the way. Just open it so that you can get your hand in there and pull this through. Maybe you leave even more than an inch, but so I'm using my seam ripper to go right in between and break a few threads, pull this open. Again, do not open this all the way to the top and bottom of the side seam because we're going to sew it shut. We just want to be able to pull the shoulder seam through. Okay, so I want to show you, I've opened up my side seam. Now what I'm going to do is I'm pulling the shoulder seam through. Okay, it's coming out right here. And I'm sticking my fingers, this is going up into that strap. And I'm pulling it out. And I need to pull it out because now here's where it's open. And keep pulling it. Okay, so this, I'm pulling the side seam out that, or pulling the shoulder seam out through the side seam that I just opened. I'm gonna roll this down because I'm trying to get this to lay flat. So it's gonna be a little bunchy. Okay. Okay, so I am pulling this. I want to get, so now what I'm trying to do is I want to get the outer and the lining seam to a point where I can pin them and sew them closed. So I need to pull this just a little bit more. Now it is bulky, so it's, you know, a little more challenging to pull through because we're trying to pull a lot through here. Okay, so we're gonna have to just work. We're gonna like sew a little bit and then we'll pull a little bit more. So what I'm doing right here is I'm gonna kind of finger press this. I'm gonna line up the seams on the top of the shoulders. Okay. And I'm gonna put a pin right where I'm going to sew. So see this? So here's where the stitching stops. I'm going to start stitching here to close up one side. And you're going to line it up. You'll see the crease where the stitching was, and that's where you are going to sew. And make sure you don't have any part of the strap caught in there. And I'm just sewing a little bit because I've got to pull the strap. So now that I've sewed a little bit, I need to pull a little bit more out so that I can get the other side flat on there. So we just stitched that right there. I'm going to pull this back out because I want to show you what we just did. So I'm pulling the shoulder strap back through the hole, pulling it back out. So now, see, we've just enclosed it. We just sewed that back. And there's no stitching on top because now your seam is on the inside. That's why you want to pull it through, because you don't want to have stitching right there. The other reason is you don't want to do it by hand because it's time consuming. And doing things on the sewing machine is just more durable. If you like to hand sew, you could certainly, fold this down. I'll fold it like this and hand sew that, but I'm going to make this a little bit more narrow. Just fit it on the lining side. I'm going to open this up. It's going to just right on the edge fit it just a teeny tiny bit more. Because my lining is just literally a hair bit bigger, and I'm kind of having to push the other side, so I'm just tightening it up just a smidge. Whoops. Okay, so now we need to close this side. So again, I'm going into the dress, the side seam that I've opened, and I'm gonna pull this. I'm kind of using my fingers to scrunch it up, and we're going to push that shoulder strap through the side seam and keep pulling it so that we can get the lining and dress part laying flat together so that we can sew it. Okay, so I'm pulling this together. Gotta manhandle it a little bit, a little bulky. Okay, so this is what this looks like. And see, I'm gonna pull this tight. That's what we're gonna do. We're gonna close it up. So I'm taking my shoulder seams and I'm lining these up. Make sure your seams are pushed out and the top seams are flat because you want to reduce that bulk. Get that all in there. Make sure you're not catching part of the shoulder seam, part of the dress. You don't want to get that tucked in there, because then you'll have to get your seam ripper and take it out. Ask me how I know, because I've done it. Okay, so I've got my pins, got it pinned closed, and I'm going to just be stitching right here to close that up. Taking my pins out as I get to it. Clip your threads. Okay, so now we're going to pull the dress back out. Clip any little, I've got a couple little threads right here, so we can clip those, clean it up. Don't want to have those sticking out. Well, so now the dress is put back together. Okay, you don't even know it's been apart. It does need some pressing. So we'll take this over to the iron. You want to press this really good. Press your seam. Just smooth this out right here around the armhole. So now what we want to do is we need to close up the opening in the dress in the side seam. This is very simple to do. You're just going to top stitch this. So you're going to just get that layer that's open. Make sure you don't grab the dress, okay? And we are going to pinch this. I'm literally just gonna do a little skinny tiny a little stitch just right along the edge. So we're not really, taking it up, we're just closing that opening. This is on the inside of the dress, so it's not going to matter if you have a little top stitching, but again, make sure you're not catching that outer part of the dress. Clip all your threads, make sure it's nice and neat. I think my snippers are getting dull. Okay, so this is all I did right there. That's it. You open this up. I mean, that's not going to make a difference. This is all on the inside, but if you pull that through, then you don't have to hand sew it. You've got everything tucked in there. It looks just like the dress came off the rack. So, and no one's none the wiser. So when you're doing alterations, you always want to be able to put the dress back together the way it came. Now, there are times that you cannot do that, and it is what it is. But for the most part, you can put your garment back together the way it came, so that you don't see stitches and things like that. And that is how you would get into a dress, that has a lining and pull that through. Now, like I said, sometimes you have to open the bodice. Sometimes you get lucky and there is the bodice is sewn to a lining, and there's two linings, so it's separate, so you can go up into it. So you've got the outer part of the dress sewed to the outer skirt part, and then the lining sewed to the lining skirt, so they're separate, and you can go straight up and you don't have to open this seam. So always check that. We didn't have that opportunity on this dress, so we did have to open the bodice lining, but it's very simple and easy. It's not really a big deal, but you just have to make sure you sew that closed. So that is how you alter the shoulder seam of a lined dress. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have any other questions about how to do this, obviously we need to go do the other side. But I love to do alterations on it. If you'd like to see some other videos on how to alter garments, leave that in the comments, and that'll give me some ideas for our future videos. If you're new here, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you want to get notified when we have a next video, just hit the little bell icon. It'll send you a little notice that a new video has come out, and we will see you in the next video. So thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next video.